Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Virtual Admissions 101. My name is Michelle DeLuce. I am Associate Director of Alumni Relations at Trinity College. Every year, our office partners with the Office of Admissions to invite members of the Trinity community with high school students to join us for an insider's look at the college admissions process. If you've participated in Admissions 101 before, you know we usually invite you back to campus during the beginning of the spring semester, but nothing about this year has been typical, and Admissions 101 is certainly no exception. With more questions than ever about how the college admissions process will work during the continuing challenges the COVID-19 pandemic presents, the Trinity College Offices of Alumni Relations and Admissions are pleased to partner for this special virtual Admissions 101 program for alumni, parents, faculty, staff, and friends of the college and their students. This afternoon, you'll have a chance to ask the Dean of Admissions and Financial Aid your questions about the admissions process and to put yourself in the shoes of a college admissions counselor by participating in an exercise where you get to evaluate applications yourself. So let's get things started. It's my pleasure to introduce our first session today. Trinity College Dean of Admissions and Financial Aid, Adrienne Oddi, is here to speak a bit about the college admissions process and to answer some of your questions. Helping us facilitate the Q&A with Adrienne is a current Trinity College senior, Olivia Painchaud. Olivia is studying public policy and law and Hispanic studies. She's a student admissions associate and has been involved in Alpha Chi Omega, the annual community events staff, the Entertainment Activities Council Barnyard, the mock trial team, and more. So without further ado, Adrienne and Olivia, take it away.
Thanks so much, Michelle. It's lovely to be with y'all this afternoon. I will start with just sort of a general overview of admissions, as general as it can be in a year that is anything but general, and then Olivia is going to help with Q&A as we go forward. We'll start with the end in mind, and that is y'all have you're investing time and trying to figure out this process and how to navigate it, and on the other side of it you should have letters of acceptances and lots of choices. So as we move throughout the program today, I think it's helpful to have the mindset of getting into college, if that's the next step for you, is inevitable. And some of the advice and exercises today are just going to help you get even more options and choices. And so the perception, I think, of the general admission officer is that we are interested in saying no. And the reality of the situation is we really want to find ways to say yes to you and to create opportunities. Like, nobody gets into admissions to be in a place to deny students. The folks who we have on our team at Trinity and my colleagues at other institutions, even the most selective of institutions, are really of the mindset that we're your partners in this process and we want to find ways to say yes to you. And sometimes that yes comes in the form of perhaps we should pursue a different option because the reality of this particular place in this moment may not be the best next step for you. But more often than not, we are trying to help you find your yes to get that big acceptance packet at the end of the process. And so the way you can do that is by continuing to participate in the things that you're doing right now, that you're here today, learning from our admissions team and getting an insider view of the process is certainly a step. Getting to know your school counselor or teachers, or talking with others about the process is another thing that you can and should be doing. And this year especially, I think there's even more empathy and grace that will be given to students and family members who are asking questions, because every school is responding to the coronavirus in really different ways. Our deadlines have shifted, our requirements have changed. And so just as you're experiencing some disruption, so are admissions offices. So we have a tremendous amount of empathy for what you're going through, because we're going through the same thing as well. And the resources that we can provide to you don't end here with Admissions 101. So please continue to stay in touch with our office if there are questions that we can answer for you. Certainly would love to see applications to Trinity if that makes the most sense for you and what's next, but also very happy to serve as a sounding board as you prepare your applications for other places. That is why we do what we do. We want to be helpful and we want to be partners with you. So please reach out as you navigate this process, both from the admissions perspective and the financial planning, paying for college perspective as well. The bulk of the conversation today is around the application process, but the finances are becoming increasingly a part of the process as well. So happy to be a resource for y'all on that front too. One of the blessings of this time is so much has paused and activities have been either delayed or shifted. And so we've had a lot of time to spend with our thoughts and to think about you students. Who are you right now? What have you learned over the last few months? Activities have been canceled, and as the world opens and closes and things get added back into your schedule and taken away, like what are you most excited about being added back into your schedule, and what are the things that when they get added back into are no longer serving you? And I want to empower you to say goodbye to the things and the activities that are no longer serving you, to free up space and energy for you to really pursue the activities and the subjects and the interests that remain as we're able to do more and different through the next few months. Because your success in the application process and really your success in college and beyond is about figuring out who you are and knowing how to advocate for yourself through this process. If it's possible to do things, especially if we have younger students who are joining us, again, I say if it's possible because there are a lot of things that are out of our control. You can do an activity or two for multiple years and show colleges and universities that you're committed to something that is really helpful. So if there's something that was in person that got shifted remotely and you're able to continue to pursue it, that's going to help stand out in an application process. But there's no special set of activities or special set of subjects or special combination of interests that are going to guarantee you a yes. And so you should really be taking this time to showcase and highlight the interests that are true to you, because that's what stands out the most in this process. The genuine responses, the authenticity of who you are and who you want to be, that's what we're looking for. So it is very much worth the time to think about who you are and you should really be doing that for yourself first and foremost. And the college application process is way down on the list of why getting to know yourself is important. And then as you continue to develop a better sense of self, get in touch with us. Get in touch with colleges and universities that are interesting to you. And that doesn't necessarily mean the very first time you think about a college, you should pick up the phone, though you're certainly welcome to. Phone etiquette is an important life skill to have that is definitely coming back in style now. But so much is available to you, even more so in this period virtually. So you have a lot of ways to connect without setting foot on campus. I think because so much is available, people can spend all of their time thinking about the college process, and that is not what we should be doing with all of our time. So my advice is to put a time limit on how much you're exploring, because you can go deep into college social media channels and deep into the rabbit hole of our websites and things of that nature and feel pressure to participate in every single event because it's accessible from your living room. And you let me tell you to or be a person who can alleviate some of that pressure. do the events that are interesting to you. We don't expect every event to be interesting to you because we're trying to tailor some of them to specific programs or interests that you have. So don't try to do everything. A couple of hours each week of research on your own is plenty to get to know different colleges and universities and our offerings. And then for family members who are joining us, talking about college should also not be all consuming. You are certainly encouraged to engage with offices as well and to get to know the community so you can be a good support system for your student. But we do want them to be in the driver's seat, and putting a time limit on family college conversation is also helpful. I've heard folks referring to it as the college power hour. So maybe it's every Tuesday at 6 p.m. we're talking about college, and then we table that discussion until next Tuesday at 6 p.m. So whatever time frame works for you, but putting some boundaries on it will mean that everybody is excited about talking of college and the things you've discovered over the last week or so and the progress that has been made, instead of folks feeling tired and overwhelmed. Like, this is a great exercise for families to come together and think about possibilities, because there are so many of them out there. And so my hope is this is a more positive and optimistic family endeavor and less stressful. Getting into a bit of the details, students, these are our decisions as admissions officers are driven by what you are doing in the classroom first and foremost. And the classroom has certainly expanded to mean different things, and know that we've got you if your school shifted how they're evaluating your performance, if the options that you had for classes were limited, or something was moved from an advanced track class to a regular track class as we shifted remotely. Like, your schools are communicating that information with us. You can certainly communicate that information with us too. We don't expect you to have divined or created a specific class that your school isn't offering. So everything that we're doing is within the context of what is available to you in your school community. And then you need to make sure that you're taking advantage of those options. And that doesn't mean you have to take 27 AP classes if 27 AP classes are offered at your school. But it does mean that if you're really interested in English or history, that an AP English or IB English is offered at your school, I hope you're taking that, because that's showing us that you're not only interested in it, but you're doing something to build upon that interest. So we're spending a lot of time with your transcripts and school documents, and looking at the choices that you've made and the choices that may have been made for you just by the constraints of your school, and hoping for growth as you move through your high school experience based off of what is offered. For folks who are a little bit younger, and for folks who are getting excited about pressing submit on their applications, if you haven't taken a look at your transcript to see what how you've grown and changed as a student over the years, I would encourage you to do that. I think it might be you might be really pleased and should be really pleased at what you've accomplished over the time period that you've been in school. And after the case studies today, you should have a better, or you can, not better is not the right word, but you'll be able to look at that transcript through the lens of an admission officer and see what they're seeing, so that you know how to continue to pitch and advocate for yourself through this process. Standardized testing is something that is a very hot topic in admissions, and has been for my entire career, but I think that has been amplified this year as access to testing has been limited and shifted and changed. So know that most schools going forward, at least for the next couple of years, will be test optional, like we are at Trinity and have been for several years. And the movement is very much de-emphasizing standardized testing in this process, because it's just not as good at predicting how well you're going to do in college as everything else that we're looking at in the process. So please don't stress about the standardized testing. I will be very interested to see how testing and its role in admissions continues to change, since so many schools are removing that as a requirement, and even more now are starting to remove it from the evaluation period. So if you want to take a test and can safely access testing, then by all means, take the tests. That certainly can help us find out who you are and send information your way. But if you are completely and totally stressed out by standardized testing, or you are not able to access a safe testing option, there are now thousands of colleges and universities that will no longer require testing. So you should not put yourself in harm's way or your family in harm's way just for an SAT or an ACT. And many schools are adjusting their merit scholarship and financial aid practices, which also often hinged upon test scores as well, to remove those from consideration for merit scholarships and financial aid. Like, that's something we've been doing at Trinity for a number of years now, and many of our friends at other institutions are jumping on board. So if it's important to you and you've got an option to take it that's safe, do it. If it's not important to you, or you don't think it's a reflection of who you are, don't worry about it. There will be options for college for you, with or without standardized testing. The essay folks will get into more in case studies, but this is really just about the story you want to share with admissions officers, not the story you think we want to read. Most students write the essay that they think we want to read. And just a couple of weeks ago, I was speaking with a senior who was getting a lot of pressure from friends and family to write a very specific type of essay about being a multiracial student in the world that we're living in. And I expect we'll get quite a few essays like that over the years. And it just wasn't resonating with her, and I could hear it in her voice, but there was a lot of external noise. And she's like, I just really want to write about painting, and this painting, and like the way I'm thinking about it. And she got really excited when she was talking about it. And that excitement and passion came through in the writing samples that she showed to me. There was sort of a formula she followed with the identity essay, and she was not following a formula in the just writing about this particular painting she was working on essay. And I got a lot more of her identity, interestingly enough, in the painting essay than I did in the essay that was explicitly about identity, that folks were like, well, colleges want to know about this. I'm like, we know about it from other methods. So if there's a burning story that you want to tell, it is a harder essay to write, because you're putting yourself out there in a way you maybe haven't before. That's the essay we want to read, not that essay that everyone else is telling you to write. This year, more than any other year, we have experienced many bumps along the way. And so we are not expecting perfection from you as a 16, 17, 18, 19-year-old applying to college. So bumps are inevitable. If you want to explain big bumps to us that maybe are more personal to you, by all means, there are many channels to do that. But don't feel like any one thing is going to keep you out, because nobody is perfect. So trust that you are being who you are and that you're learning from mistakes that are made. It's much more important to us how you respond to mistakes, failures, bumps, than the failures, mistakes in and of themselves. So take some risks, see what happens, learn from it, keep growing, and tell us what that means to you. This is an incredibly human process, and so we want to get to know you. We want to hear your voices. And because it's a human process, sometimes the decisions that we make don't make a lot of sense outside of the admissions committee room. So we're asking you to be your complete and authentic self in this process. And we're also balancing that with institutional needs. So if you get a decision from Trinity or any other place that doesn't necessarily make sense, know that it's not a value judgment on who you are as a person. The hardest part about this work is saying no to really amazing students. That is my least favorite time of the school year. So your admissions officers are very much advocating for you, and oftentimes the no is more a product of space than it is about anything that you did wrong. So um, it's very easy to say, it's much harder to hear. I hope that you don't get any no's in the process, but if you do, know that it's just as hard on the admission officers as it is on you. And along with that, you and your friends may get different college admissions decisions. So make sure you're being a good friend and family member and celebrating each other's wins and helping to cope and move through the losses in this process. This is not something we should be losing friends or getting into screaming matches over family members about. This is a part of life, and for some, maybe the first time you've heard no before, and that's a good lesson because plan B's, C's, D's, that's what life that's what makes life really beautiful and interesting. So the seemingly linear path that you have imagined hopefully works out, but if it doesn't, I think you'll appreciate the twists and turns as they unfold. And with that, I will leave you with a motivating infant who is also rooting for you and open it up to questions.
Adrienne, thank you so much for that introduction. Before we jump into the pre-submitted questions that we have, I do just want to recommend to everyone to use the Q&A function if you do have any pressing questions that you would like Adrienne to answer. Our first question is a two-part question. How important is early decision this year, and how important, if at all, is being a legacy applicant?
It's a great question, and I think this early decision is helpful if and when you have a first choice, regardless of sort of your financial circumstances or background. If you have a clear first choice school and your early decision school is one that meets full need, you should absolutely take advantage of early decision as an option. In general, in the pre-coronavirus time, early application pools are smaller, admissions officers are fresh and excited to be reading, so you're at the top of the pile instead of somewhere in the middle or at the bottom. And so if you have a clear first choice, you should submit. And a lot of people hesitate around the finances, and there's often greater acceptance rates for students who need financial aid. There's, the budget seems bigger in early decision because the pool is smaller. So we're committed to meeting the need of students admitted to Trinity and other schools who can do that. If they are your early decision school, you should apply, because I think this year we will certainly be paying very close attention to our early decision applicant pool. And I know my colleagues at other institutions are doing that as well, because we also want a community of people who are super excited to be bantams. And that's what that early decision application signals to us. And so we want you to be in a classroom of folks who are very, very excited to be here in Hartford. As far as legacy status goes, I'm glad this question came together because they are a little bit related, much like we want students who are excited to be at Trinity. And usually the early decision students have done a lot of research, have clear connections to the community, can articulate why this would be a really great fit for them. The same often exists for legacy students, regardless of the round of admission they're applying to. There's a connection to the place. And so legacy students with clear interests that are individual and not necessarily bigger certainly stand out in the process, because we do also have students who throw in an application because they're getting a lot of that family pressure. There is a lot of family history there. And so we sort of tease that out in the admissions process. So it's your connection as an individual student matters the most. And if that connection is facilitated by connections to the institution from family members and experiences they've had, that's great.
We have a few questions about going abroad in a student's high school career. So what is admissions view on going abroad? Is it seen as a positive thing? The attendees would just like to know about going abroad in high school.
Absolutely. I think any opportunity to experience a different environment can be received really positively by admissions offices. So if you have the opportunity to go abroad, by all means, go abroad and really throw yourself into that experience. If you don't have the opportunity to go abroad, but have access or interested in a different way of knowing or living that is closer to your community, that is also really special and exciting to read, because we're looking for ways to build bridges, and we want bridge builders in our community. So having that experience of something else or outside of your day-to-day can certainly help a lot with that.
How would you recommend presenting an abroad experience on the Common Application?
Presenting an abroad experience should be much more about what is happening with your own development as a student, and less about sort of imposing your experience as an American on a particular community abroad. We get a lot of essays on students who do service trips or mission trips, and those tend to be a bit more about the other community and creating space and distance from the student and that particular community. And what we're really looking for are people who are pouring into a community and really becoming a part of it. And so the more you can talk about and kind of weave your experience abroad into who you are, the better that's going to come across to an admissions officer, because it's going to be a part of you, and you should talk about it as a part of you instead of from a distance, whether it's 1 mile or thousands of miles. We want it to be in you now.
As a preface to the next question, there is on the Common Application a Trinity specific essay question that is optional to answer. But our next question is, what is the difference between the Common App personal essay and the Trinity specific essay? And which one is more important, or should the Trinity optional specific essay be completed?
These are great questions. So the Common App essay is more important than the Trinity essay, which is only a little bit hard for me to say, but that essay is going to go to all schools that you are applying to. And as much as I would love all of you to only be applying to Trinity, I, as a person, believe in the power of choices, so would encourage you to submit at least more than one college application. And I would hate for you to ruin or diminish your chances somewhere else by putting Trinity College in your Common App, your general Common App essay. I'd certainly love to read it as the Dean of Admissions and Aid at Trinity, but I would not be giving you good advice if you were naming Trinity specifically in your general essay. So if I was a student trying to think about where to spend my time, more time should be given to that personal essay on the general Common Application, since it's going to more places. And then the Trinity essay and any other supplemental essay that a school is asking for, if it's optional, I would encourage you to do it, because that also helps us see where your interests are. And if you're having, if you're having a hard time wanting to write optional essays for a particular school, that might be a signal to you about where your interests really are, because I would encourage you to think of it as a short answer and not an additional full-blown essay. It's really an opportunity for you to show that connection to the school that you have.
And in line with the conversation about the essays, we have a question in the Q&A section. When writing my essay, are there any specific topics I should try to avoid to not sound recycled or basic?
That's a really good question, and it's hard to answer because inevitably any topic I give you, somebody on this call is going to have already written their essay on that topic or really excited about it. And you as a person can put your own individual spin on any topic in ways that would be compelling. And so I would encourage students thinking about essays to spend some time figuring out what you want to spend 600 words on. And that could be literally anything, mindful that admissions officers are largely strangers. So there are some topics like the dating essays always come across a little bit interesting because that's not necessarily how I would lead a conversation with a stranger. But you know, there could be something in there that is really compelling. It doesn't typically happen though. Um, and so just know that this is kind of an introduction to who you are and an opportunity for you to flesh out your application. We get your activities in other places. We get some of the identity pieces in just general information section of the Common App. So you don't have to repeat the same thing in each response. If you have multiple responses, like a general essay and a Trinity response, those can be about totally different things because there's no way in a full application we'll have your full story. So you should use every piece as a way to add to your story. So that didn't exactly answer the question, and I'm sorry for that, but there isn't an exact precise answer, especially around something so personal as an essay. And I hope the activity that you do next will give you a little bit more context for why we don't say these are the topics you should write about and these are the topics you shouldn't, because so much depends on you as a student.
How would you recommend students best disclose learning differences on college applications?
Disclosing learning differences is completely and totally up to you. It does help us make sure that we have the support structure in place for you upon arrival. So that can be in an essay, it can be in an additional information section of the Common Application. It can be something that a school counselor or teacher writes for you instead of you writing about it as well. So oftentimes the essays that are exclusively about learning differences tend to be more about the difference and less about the student. So if you do want to write your essay on that, make sure your voice is coming through and how this is allowing you to move through the world is coming through, and it's not necessarily a lesson on that particular learning difference. But if you want somebody else to tell us that so you can use the space in your application for something else, that's totally fine. You can also just send us an email and we can put it in your application file as well.
And another question, how does admissions view a younger sibling whose older sibling has gained acceptance to a particular school but has gone elsewhere when considering the younger sibling?
So the question is, older sibling got in to school but went somewhere else, and so now just a little bit of hesitation, maybe younger sibling will get the same answer because older sibling didn't come, and we treat siblings as individual folks. So I wouldn't worry too much about if older sibling was accepted and didn't come, because most students are saying no to more colleges than they can say yes to, and we understand that, and we would have wished for both of you to be on campus, but we'll take a chance on the younger sibling.
If a student applies regular decision before the early decision deadline, will that application be reviewed earlier? And would the student potentially hear back from the school earlier?
So that's going to depend on the institution and their institution's practices. In some cases, if you apply earlier, regardless of how you're applying or what round, you could hear back earlier. And in other cases, your application will very likely be reviewed earlier, but you still may not hear until all regular decision applications are being released. I still think you should apply earlier in general, just so you can have a nice holiday season in between semesters.
On the Common App, in the family section, there's a question that states, are any of those relatives a sibling, step-sibling, grandparent, step-grandparent, and a list of various other relatives. But the question is, where do you place mother or father?
Yes, so with parent information, you actually, as you're filling out the Common App, there's a parent information section, and you can put where your parents attended college in that section. So that's where the parent college information is captured.
How does a gap year look to admissions? Would you suggest a student apply before their gap year and then ask for a deferral if they get in? Or could they reapply and realistically get in again?
Sure. So these are slightly different questions. I'll answer the first one about gap years and how admissions offices receive them. We're in full support of a gap year. If you want to take a gap year, by all means, you should do it. I think in many cases, it's easier to apply when you're in school and not during your gap year experience, just because you have access to teachers and counselors and registrars who are sending other documents and components of your application. You're seeing those folks a bit more regularly, even if you're in a fully remote school environment, than you would be during your gap year experience. So that piece is generally easier. If you apply as a senior and don't quite have the options that you want, a gap year could help you in the next year when you reapply. It could change an admissions decision. So that is possible. But I would encourage students, if you're taking a gap year, if you apply, get in, deposit at a school, and defer, to keep that school in mind and to keep that school informed, because they really are counting on you. And so if your plans change, and sometimes life happens and plans change, letting the admission office know early so that a space could be offered to another student will be really helpful. It's harder for us when students don't tell us until classes start again, and we're looking for you and worrying about you, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm at this other school now. Oh, I would have celebrated that with you, and made sure that we gave that spot to somebody else if I had known earlier. So if you're depositing at a school, I really hope that you're doing that because that's where you want to be. But these experiences that we have in between high school and in college can really transform how you're thinking. So just let us know if and when you change your mind.
We have a separate question about standardized testing. So we went over standardized tests in the beginning, but this question is mostly asking about advice for taking standardized tests for someone who is not does not particularly perform well.
So question is about whether we should take them if you're worried about performance, or report them if we're worried about interpretation, or sort of both, it sounds like to me. And if you're if standardized tests really freak you out, or it's just not your jam, again, there are thousands of options now where you don't have to submit a standardized test score. And if we're getting into really inside baseball, that the University of California system is moving to completely test blind. That is the largest public university system in the country and is often a leader in what happens at other institutions. So if I'm a betting woman, predict that more and more institutions will be removing test scores from admissions evaluations on the horizon. So please don't stress out about the tests. And if you ever want an admission officer set of eyes on test scores before you submit them, send them my way and let me know where you're thinking about sending them. And I'm happy to give you an objective opinion on how a school might interpret those test scores. That goes back to using your resources. So open invitation if folks want an evaluation of scores. And if you end up applying to Trinity and those scores are lower, I will pretend like I didn't see them. But we are available for questions certainly throughout the program and throughout your college experience. So please stay in touch if you're not in touch already. Login information for the next portion has been emailed to all of you, and I am seeing information getting posted in the chat as well. If you can't find that email in the sea of email fun that we get these days, there will be a short break from 12:45 to 1 today when current students are going to be available just for more informal get to know you conversation. So that is what is next. If you don't need a break, or feel free to pop in and out of that experience as you are able to. And then our case study exercise, where we're going really into the weeds and getting to be admissions officers for a bit, will begin at 1 p.m. So thank you all so much for your time today and your questions. And I look forward to getting to know you all throughout this process, and then hopeful that we'll be meeting each other in person soon.
There is a question about being a foreign student, and if there's anything that the student should be prepared for if we have time.
Sure, I'm happy to stick around for a moment. And for international students, the process is largely very similar for admissions. We are still hoping for a common application, for transcripts from your schools. Depending on the language of instruction at your school, there could be a and the language of your home country, there could be a requirement for English as a foreign language tests coming our way. And we have a lot of different options for those. So we are requiring English as a foreign language tests for students, but even though we're not requiring SAT or ACT tests, the difference really is around the financial aid process. International students will need to send us just the CSS profile instead of the FAFSA and the CSS profile.
We have one final question specifically for me about why I chose Trinity. So my sister actually attended Trinity when I was a freshman. So I had seen the school, I had visited, and I fell in love with the campus, and I fell in love with her experience here. I think one of the major decisions that swayed me to Trinity rather than the other schools I was debating was Hartford specifically, and all of the different opportunities. I come from New Hampshire, so relatively small-minded, very similar kinds of people, and the global experience that Trinity gives was the most influential factor to me. Trinity has diversity in terms of ethnicity and race, but also perspectives and ideas and culture. And so that was the most exciting thing for me and really swayed my decision to come here.
Thanks so much, everybody. We don't want to keep you from getting to know more students and to hear directly from them in this time here. And if you need a break, since it's a lot of screen time in a row, we want to make sure you have the time to take that. So thank you all, and hope to see you soon.